And we're back for another video. I only doing one this week. If you saw the little short reel I posted, I've been very busy with cider fermentation. And as soon as I wrap up shooting this, I'm going to fire up the first strip run. So, looking forward to that. Feels good to be in like full production mode again. It's been a minute. But today we're going to talk about, people always ask me when they come in like what my favorite product I make is. And I always tell them that they're all my kids. But honestly, the one I drink the most of is Pipe Dream, our aged rum. I love this stuff. It's very interesting. It came about as an accident almost. I think I talked about in the video about writer's block that when you're making rum from molasses, you have to cut the molasses down with water to hit the ideal sugar ratio. And I was really bad at math. And so I ended up with a ton of high proof rum sitting around doing nothing. And at the same time I had whiskey barrels that hadn't been filled with whiskey yet. So brand new American oak. And I decided to age some rum. My partner at the time was like, what if it sucks? What if we end up needing more rum for writer's block? And I said, Dave, what if it's amazing? We don't know if we don't try it out, right? And if it sucked, I figured we'd just redistill it. But it didn't suck. It's lovely. And it's interesting because most rums go into used whiskey barrels if they're aged. Not many go into brand new American oak. And so most of the batches have only been a couple years old because that new oak really starts to take over the flavor, which is a good thing in whiskey. I don't like it so much with rum, I found. The batch prior to the current one was over 4 years old. I think it was close to 5 in new oak, and it was starting to get over-charred, over-oaked for my taste. But this current batch number 11, it's about 3.5, 4 years maybe in brand new oak, and then I finished it in some of my used ex-smoke whiskeys from the smoke component from Dear Johnny. And it was one of those experiments where I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, because about a year or two into finishing, it was the smoke and the rum flavors were not getting along very well, and I was like, I might have to redistill this and try to salvage it. But I left it alone because I didn't need it at the time, and finally got back into it this past fall, and it completely turned around. And it's definitely by far my favorite batch. Dialed back the oak by doing the barrel finishing, and really lovely, really fruity, little hint of smoke, but very, very subtle, and very happy with it. The label, we look at that, is a nod to surfing the Great Lakes, which I'll talk more about later, but that's an actual Lake Erie surf spot just east of Cleveland. A lot of people don't realize you can surf the lakes, but you can. It's fun. Yeah, I'm always trying to do just little experiments, and things usually work out in one way or another, which leads us to today's word of the day: improvisation. Big fan of improvisation in most aspects of life. I think it's good to be able to think on your feet and pivot when need be. Try things out, push yourself a little outside of your comfort zone, and feels really good when good things come of that. I've played in some improv noise bands over the years. And then with the distilling, throwing that into the used smoke barrels, I wasn't sure it was going to work. I just tried it because I needed to move some rum around one day, and for a little while it felt like it was going to fall apart, but then it came back together. So don't be afraid to think outside of the box, step outside your comfort zone, and you never know what kind of cool stuff is going to happen. Regarding rum, it's very similar to gin in the sense that it is very open to interpretation. It's crazy. It's like the Wild West of the spirits world. So bourbon, if you're not familiar, bourbon has to be by law at least 51% corn, has to go into brand new American oak, has to be distilled at a certain proof, has to be made in the U.S. There's all these rules you have to follow to call it bourbon, and so the flavor profile is a very narrow window. Rum, if you want to make rum, it has to be distilled from sugarcane. That's it. You can add flavoring to it, you can barrel age it, you can not barrel age it, you can make it from molasses, which is what I do. You can make it from fresh pressed sugarcane juice, which is going to give you like a cachaça, or an agricole style rum, which is more like grassy and like kind of vegetal. If you wanted, you can make it from Domino sugar. It's going to taste terrible, but it is still technically rum. You can't make it from maple syrup or sorghum. There's been a few cases of stuff like that slipping through where people have had something called sorghum rum classified by the TTB, who you would think would know better, but turns out a lot of times they don't. But has to be from the sugarcane plant. Rum came about, was really America's first spirit. Well before whiskey and bourbon became what we were known for. Like even before bourbon, rye was more well known, and it wasn't until all the Scots and Irish folks moved down to Appalachia and found that corn grew better than rye that they really focused on bourbon. But before that, way back in the old colonial days, if you think, we were going to the Caribbean, was not a great business model from a moral standpoint, but plundering their resources, and mostly for sugar. But they eventually learned you could also take the leftover scraps from processing sugar, molasses, and turn it into alcohol. So, sounds great, right? It's a fantastic spirit though, and one of the interesting things, because it's so open to interpretation, you see all these different styles and varieties and flavors. Different countries in the Caribbean make their rum in very different ways and are known for having like kind of an island style, specific flavor profile. There's been a lot of work the last few years to try to create a geographic like indication, like the way champagne, you know, is coming from the Champagne region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling wine. There are some bigger companies out there fighting that because they have a vested interest in selling people things that were not made the way the other producers are doing it. The Jamaican rum style is very well known for being high ester, funky flavors and have a real like just national character to them. And one of these big companies, all my rum nerd fans will know, is buying bulk spirit from Jamaica and then shipping it off to age in Europe and such. And so you're not getting that island, the humidity, the tropics, you're not getting that effect of the aging there. But they still want to be able to call it Jamaican rum because it's trendy and people will buy it because of that. And this is a company that is very large and has a lot of money, and these rum producers, the other rum producers in Jamaica, are much smaller enterprises. A lot like me, they're just proud of what they're doing and they feel like they should be able to protect that. So you can dive more into that if you want. Another interesting thing with rum, I mentioned it's high, like the Jamaican style rums are like very funky. They have a lot of what are called esters. Esters are these aromatic compounds that'll give you like overripe fruit, banana, and it's like this kind of strange funkiness. At least in rum, you'll see other esters that give you all kinds of different flavors. But what those are there acids produced during fermentation, and as you're distilling, those acids will bond with the ethanol and create esters. So this chemical process happens inside the still. But the Jamaicans, there's a chemist back in 1906, I think, H.H. Cousins, who developed a process to increase the esterification. Where if you know anything about Jamaican rum, you've probably heard of like dunder pits, D-U-N-D-E-R, dunder. But dunder is what's left in the still after you run it. So you're boiling your wash, alcohol comes off one end, and what's left in the pot is dunder, which is typically just discarded in most processes. but they would actually save it because it's full of all this biomaterial and lots of acids, and that would build a high acid wash that would then create these high ester flavors. But he developed a process that went even further, and you can look it up online. I found the whole PDF of this paper. It's amazing. It's from 1906. I think a lot of people, when they think about, especially somewhere like Jamaica and like their rum, they assume it's this very like just kind of backwoods, like not highly educated thing. But this is a full-on scientific paper, so it's a little bit more of your colonialism and racism in there with that. But anyway, Jamaican rum's really cool. I've tried to do some of those processes. I've not succeeded to date. I've got a little bit more funk out of stuff I've done, but that's something I'm going to dive back into here pretty soon and see if I can kind of crack the code and figure it out. That's all I've got today on rum. Been talking about like what I want to call this next little section. I was thinking macro and micro, since I'm usually talking about larger, looking at the whole world kind of stuff and what has inspired me in the past, and then microscope on the local scene and what I want to, or what I like checking out here and what I think other people should check out. So still a work in progress. My dad told me I should call the first section what makes me weird, because I'm into a lot of weird stuff. And so the thing I'm going to talk about today that makes me weird, I hinted at earlier, but it is lake surfing. So not a lot of people realize you can surf the Great Lakes. It's usually fall to spring, whenever they're not frozen, that the winds are coming from the north and building waves. You can actually get some really decent sized waves on the lakes. You pretty much have to become an amateur meteorologist to do it, because the window for good surf is very narrow, and then you also need a very thick wetsuit with a hood, gloves, and everything, because it's very, very chilly. But I've actually surfed lakes only a handful of times. The last couple times I went up, I got skunked, and there was either no waves or nobody out, and I've promised the people that care about me that I will not paddle out into the middle of a very chilly lake alone. But I have done it. I've stood up on a surfboard and said, oh yes, Cleveland. But lake surfing, really cool. There's other options for surfing. There's something, if you're a kayaker, you might be familiar with, called a standing wave. And I know Dayton has two parks. There's one in Springfield that have these waves. They're like rapids that don't move. I mean, it's a rapid, but it'll create a wave that you can actually stand in place and surf. And I've tried doing that a couple times. I want to try to do that again once it warms up a little bit. And then for today's little microscope section, talking about rum, Ohio Rum Society. Friends with Chad White and a lot of people in there, but he started this up this not long after I'd started up the distillery, and I was just starting to work on writer's block, and we got talking about rum, and he's also kind of responsible for like pushing me more in that direction of wanting to put out Pipe Dream, and really glad we crossed paths. But if you're a rum nerd and don't know about it, you should join it. If you're curious about rum, you should join it. They have monthly meetups, usually sometimes more. A lot of people are very passionate about rum. You will get to try rum that you have no business having your hands on. Everyone's always happy to like bring stuff from their private collection and share it. And you will learn a lot about rum, meet some really cool people. So Ohio Rum Society, check that out. If you want to try surfing, start learning to read weather reports and pick up a wetsuit and go surf the lakes. And if you haven't tried batch number 11 of Pipe Dream yet, pick that up. It's really good. It's my favorite bottling to date of rum, and it's right up there with my favorite of anything I've ever put out. But that's it for now. Thanks. Cheers.